Hello and welcome to this Bioprocess International Ask the Expert webcast. I'm your host, Leah Rosen, the online editor for Bioprocess International. Before we get started, just a couple of notes. This webcast is being recorded and will be made available for replay in the multimedia section of our website. We've muted the audio lines, but we welcome you to type in your questions for our speaker in the chat window on your screen. After the presentation, we will begin the question and answer portion, because this is, after all, Ask the Expert, and I will ask our speaker your questions from the chat window. Your questions in the chat window will only be visible to myself and our speakers. So thank you for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jackie Ignacio and Mike Farrell.
Thank you, Leah. Appreciate it. My name is Jackie Ignacio, and I work for what is now known as Millipore-Sigma. When we entered into this actual presentation, we were EMD Millipore, and we have since acquired Sigma Aldrich. And so here in the United States, you're going to see some Millipore-Sigma branding. My role is the Corporate Responsibilities Program Manager. I oversee customer initiatives and in particular recycling of our products. And so today I'm going to talk about how we're actually doing that. We have two programs. And then with me on the line to help and also answer questions about the process that we're using is Mike Farrell. Mike, if you want to say a little bit about your role as well.
Thanks, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. Again, it's Mike Farrell with Triumvirate Environmental. In my role as the Corporate Disposal and Recycling Coordinator, I work with Jackie and her team to assess certain materials for recycling at our facility in Jeannette, Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so moving on here. So as I said, we've got a new brand and a new name. We're Millipore-Sigma. And just really quickly, what I'm going to touch on today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of why we're doing recycling with product recycling at Millipore-Sigma. Then I'm going to talk about some of the history and the challenges that we face in this field, in biopharma, particularly in the single-use products. What are some of those challenges that we found out through some of our piloting programs? And then the third part is really talking about our partnership with Triumvirate and the process and how we overcome some of those challenges and how we now have a program here fully functional on the East Coast. So why do we do this? The bottom line for Millipore-Sigma is that we take responsibility across the entire life cycle of our products. When we look at not just our greenhouse gas emissions, but what are we doing along the line to help our customers as well. And so we have several different areas that we work in or that we have initiatives in. One of them is this recycling, or what we do end of life for our products. But we also do things around manufacturing, where we're decreasing our energy, water, greenhouse gas emissions from those production sites. We've got initiatives around packaging reduction, distribution. How are we distributing our products? Are we shifting down to the lowest carbon impact? And then also on the product use, we have something called Design for Sustainability now embedded into our design process, our product design process. And so looking at ways that we can actually decrease at the customer site too, as well as our own when we're building and making these products for you. But obviously I'm going to talk about the end of life and the recycling program for a difficult stream of products. But before I do that, let me talk a little bit about how did we get here. So really we've been thinking about this and doing things since around 2007, 2008. We recognized that there was a need. We had a lot of plastic in our products and a lot of virgin plastic, particularly in the biopharma processing. We have to really stick to virgin plastics and materials that really can't leach anything into the end product. And so we were looking, customers were actually asking us at the time, but we were also looking to how could we do this better. And it started with looking at our door pour filters, the cartridge filters and some of the capsule filters, but really how could we get those recycled? And so we entered into the sort of, could we do a return program and have customers send back their used door pour cartridges to our site here in New England actually. And what we found out was we're really not a waste management company, and that wasn't a really good concept for us. And so we entered into some piloting phases through about the end of 2011, 2012 and 2013 with another waste vendor. And we actually started at the same time another program called ECHO, which has to do with our lab water cartridges. And so we began a real mail-back program, and then we did the pilots with biopharma customers along the East Coast. What this program was really doing at the time, and this is kind of important to understand, is when the products come back, they were manually disassembled, and the plastic had to be separated. So we would have a pile of polypropylene, a pile of HDPE, and then all of the filter material and anything that couldn't really be recycled at that time, it didn't have a commodity value, was going into a cement kiln and replacing coal as an alternative fuel source. So the concept of being able to recycle these products in a safe way was actually proven. Unfortunately, that manual disassembly, there is some safety issues there, but there's also a cost associated with it. And so as we started to look to go and ramp up the program, 2013 and 2014, we really realized that ramping it up became a financial burden to us. And so in order to keep a program like this going, we needed to find an alternative way to do the program. Manually disassembling the products, shipping them back to one location, all of those things are actually very cost, and we just really could not maintain it. I was pretty much told that I had to find another way. At the end, or about the middle of 2014, that was when Triumvirate Environmental actually reached out to us. They were doing some work with us in the haz waste field and told us about an alternative methodology that they were using. And so we looked into that. We went through a very rigorous RFP process, and they won the bid. And in the beginning of this year, 2015, we actually rolled out a proper program for biopharma. We do have it right now in the East Coast, and that's basically because of the logistics and where we are in the process. We've decided to keep it contained and make sure that we can stabilize it. And also with Triumvirate's process, we want to make sure that we're not trying to push something a little bit further ahead before we really know exactly what we're doing. And so there were changes to the programs, also to the ECHO program, and we've been going ever since this year, so we're moving along. So just a real quick highlight of the two programs that we have right now. As I mentioned, the ECHO is a cartridge recycling program. This one is a mail-back program. These are cartridges, usually single users, and they can actually ship those back from anywhere in the United States to the facility in Jeannette, the Triumvirate facility. Looking at the amount of cartridges that we sold in the U.S. alone, it's about 363 metric tons per year. So trying to get those out of landfills and out of incineration is really important to us and also to our customers. It's kind of a heavy weight at their site. The biopharma product recycling program, however, is a little bit different. Now you're starting to look at a very large amount of product and a weight behind it, and so it's really a freight-only program. And so currently, with our facility being in Jeannette, Pennsylvania, we're running this on the East Coast only. I did do a little bit of an estimate based on our pilots, and if we look at the East Coast, 20 to 25 customers doing GMP manufacturing, it's on average about 1,900 metric tons per year. And this can account for anywhere between 10% to 50% of the solid waste from a GMP site. So it's quite a lot of waste to some of our customers, and we realize that it needs to be taken care of. Right now, a lot of it's either being autoclaved and then landfilled, autoclaved and incinerated, or sent to incinerators, or even just landfilled in some cases. So we realized that there's really, we needed to bring this program out and do this for our customers. It is a unique program. There is nothing else like it right now on the market or a way to recycle these products. So working with customers, being collaborative with them is really important. So some of the challenges, one of the things that I've heard from as I was doing the pilots and through the past couple of years is, well, these products, they really can't be recycled. They're biohazardous. There's a lot of it, and it's really gross. There's really gross stuff. And so I sort of broke it down into four main concepts of where the challenges really lie. And so the first one is mixed components. The products themselves are made of many different types of materials and different types of plastics. And when you're looking at recycling, the recycling infrastructure and industry really likes to have things in what I call a clean stream. They like their polypropylene and their HDPE separated. They like their PET in another pile. And the reason for that is plastic is a commodity, and that's how a recycling system really works and how it pays for itself. And so our products really had to be taken apart if we wanted to work in that field. And it was a point at which, before we met Triumvirate, where we thought we were going to have to actually shut the program down and not go forward because we needed the recycling industry to sort of work with us, and luckily Triumvirate has come on board to do that. The second thing is the amount of waste. So in the biopharma industry, as I mentioned before, this anywhere between 14 to 20,000 pounds per month is what we were seeing in the pilot, just in the non-biohazardous waste stream coming out of a plant. So it's quite a bit of waste, and 80 to 120 tons per year that needs to get shifted. And to be honest, I think if we really go back in now and look at the biohazardous waste stream, what's being classified as biohazardous, we can see even more than what I've got quoted here. The third thing I would say is the multiple product types. And so in single use, we've got many different things being used. You have your bags, bioreactor bags with tubing and filters, and they're all attached. And so that goes usually all together in the bin. And so being able to sort of separate and segregate was also part of the difficulty that we had in the previous program. And so, again, looking at many different types of components, but also the different products that are in that mix and within a bag, and then adding to it the fact that it is pretty gross. There's a lot of gross media, there's a lot of smell, and things are within a day sitting in a plastic bag. Mold and things like that can definitely grow on the filters in particular. And so safety was the other part. I personally didn't feel good about having someone somewhere in a recycling situation having to cut open some of these filters. While I know that in drug development we're trying to make things that are, in non-infectious carriers, there still is that idea that this was pretty nasty. Again, fungal growth or mold growing on there, or even bacterial growth, and then of course the risk of exposure. And so the whole safety aspect is really also a big part or a challenge when you're looking at recycling this. Now I just want to talk about the products really quickly to get everybody's head around, why is this not, there we go, just to remind everybody what products are actually going to be considered in this program. And so we've got the single-use bags, tubing, and connectors, so anything from bioreactors, sampling, even the Novaseptum bags that we make. We also take back, I'll say it now, we do take back our competitors' products as well, and part of that came out of our learning within the pilots that getting a customer to separate and segregate the Millipore Sigma products from somebody else's products was just not going to happen. It was too much of a burden. And we realized that at the end of the day, all of this plastic just needs to get recycled. And so we take on and recycle basically everything from everybody. Also within the products are the cartridge and capsule filters. So on our side, it would be the door pour and the OptiCap, and all of the other small air vents and things like that. And then clarification and depth filters. We call them the Millistack pods, but also the Clarasol filters, and those big, heavy, thick filters that are generally the really biggest offenders with the smell. I'll be honest with you on that. And then the other thing that we've sort of discovered and found that would be very helpful to a lot of our customers is looking at the empty chemical containers and drums that they have on their site. We send in a lot of salts and buffers and things in these plastic containers, and they can actually be used to store the waste in. We've got some customers that are able to turn them around and put them into the program, and then they get recycled along with all of the other stuff as well. So who is Triumvirate and what is their process? Why are we working with them? So basically, just to give you an overview of Triumvirate Environmental, as I've said before, they are an East Coast-based environmental company. They do full-service environmental services. They've been around for a little over 27 years now, and they have about 13 different locations spread along the East Coast. So up here in the Massachusetts area, they're in Somerville is their headquarters, but from Maine down to Florida, they have locations. They work in 4 main industries or key industries. The attractiveness is the fact that they do have the life sciences, which is the biopharma and the big pharmas. And so working together, they understand our customers. It's been a really good match. They know what to handle. They understand the GMP manufacturing sites really well. And so we felt like this was a really good match for us. The process that they're using, and I'm going to go into this in the next slide, but just so that you know, it did come out of actually recycling plastic from regulated medical waste. So if you think about when you go to the hospital, all of the plastic that gets used now, everything is disposable, mainly to cut down on contamination and infection rates. And so everything goes into the red bins and goes into the biohazard bins, whether it's biohazard or not, or medical waste or not, and ends up somewhere. Usually it gets autoclaved and landfilled, or it can be ground up and autoclaved in other processes, but generally speaking, it was not being recycled. There was a lot of plastic in there, and it just wasn't being used. It was landfilled or burned off. And so a few years ago, Triumvirate decided to look into how could they do something different, how could they change the regulated medical waste industry. And they came up with a process that can actually grind up and sterilize the medical waste, the regulated medical waste, and turn it into a plastic lumber. And by marrying the two together at the same location, what they've come up with is nobody has to segregate and separate out the plastics. It's a safe process. You've got sterilization. And then you've got the actual product being made on site. So you now have traceability, but also the back end of not having to sell that plastic to the highest bidder, basically. That doesn't become a commodity. And so it keeps the costs down and actually makes it more keeps the costs down for the end-use customer. And so we really like this. It's, like I said, it meets some of those needs and some of those things that we talked about, not having to segregate, separate, manually disassemble, and 100% of the product now goes into recycling. So there's none of this sending something off to either a waste-to-energy or a cement kiln. It all goes into the plastic lumber. So on this next slide, this is an overview, a very simple overview of what happens out at the Jeannette facility, Jeannette, Pennsylvania. And so there's actually two places where waste comes in. And if I can get my arrow working here. So as you see up at the top here, we've got the biohazardous waste stream. That's plant 1 is what we call that. And that is actually a separate doorway into the plant. And it comes in, there's a QA, QC process that is in place. And then it goes through what's called a regulated medical waste processor. So if somebody in the biopharma had things that were classified as biohazardous waste, or if they were currently today autoclaving things, they could actually come in through this regulated side and get ground up and sterilized. And then it goes through a little bit of a separation where if there's any glass or big metal chunks, things like that, fall out and goes into a drying and blending step. When that drying and blending, it then goes through the plastic manufacturing side of into that plant, gets extruded and put into various molds where plastic lumber is made. That plastic lumber, we call it industrial grade. It can go for things like parking stops, speed bumps, some of the other construction industry, landscape timbers, things like that. Now, if you had biopharma waste that wasn't biohazardous, which was what we were working with in our in the pilot programs, it could come in through literally a separate door into what we call plant 2, and again go through now another grinding and separating step. So it's not going to get combined with the medical waste until they're both sterilized and ground up. And then there's that blending and drying step and extrusion and into the various molds and into the plastic lumber. So pretty much the same thing, but just being able to bypass the whole regulated medical waste. The thing to note here, though, is because it is a permitted site, there are approvals in QA, QC definitely on the non-haz waste as well. So that's pretty much the system. As I said, it's a very high level. There's a lot more that goes on out at that site, a lot of machinery. It's a manufacturing site as well as the containment and grinding and separating of the regulated medical waste. Okay, moving on. So how do you get started? Basically, contact us. The first step is to really talk to us. I can do Mike and I can either present over the phone in a WebEx type of thing. We can come to the site and give a presentation for anyone that's interested in learning a little bit more about the process. You can either contact me here at Responsibility at emdmillipore.com, or you can contact your account manager if Triumvirate Environmental is actually working at your site currently, and you can call them. The number's there. We can also have this available to you. The next step, or at the same time when we arrange that meeting, but the next step that has to happen is we do need to conduct a walkthrough assessment. And what we usually find in this is that we're identifying the appropriate waste stream, the products that you have on site and what you're using. But often what comes up is we find other products that can also be included. At one site, we actually came upon roller bottles that are currently used. These roller bottles had glass beads in them, and so no recycler was able to take them. But we were able to actually bring those into the program as well. They're considered separate from the program, but again, you're working with Triumvirate. This is their process, and so they would be included as well. And for that customer, that was actually shifting their waste into recycling by quite a large percentage. I know Mike probably remembers a little bit better than me on those details, so I'll let him answer those questions. And then, of course, also determining the logistics, what works best for the site. One of the things we did learn about doing this program is every site is different. Although you would say, oh, everybody's doing manufacturing, biopharma manufacturing, it should be somewhat similar. Everybody has a different landscape. Everybody has a different size. And so we really work with Triumvirate to figure out with the customer what works best for them. When are things coming down off the line? Do they have place to use different types of roll-off containers? Or do they need to actually have a truck on site that they put the waste in and then pull that truck off at a regular time? And so, again, all of that gets done in that second meeting or that walkthrough and assessment. And then Triumvirate's able to come back and give a quote and work with the customer to make the shift over, get this stuff shifted into the recycling. They can begin pickups and start recycling. Once you started recycling, we do have a way to give reports back just like any other recycling company, but Triumvirate, again, is keeping track of the weight, and EMD Millipore Sigma will be able to give you back some data, hopefully on a quarterly basis, on your greenhouse gas emissions and how you're shifting the burden there for your site. So at this time, I'll open it up for questions. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
So can other waste be collected and taken to the Triumvirate facility, or is it just the single-use products?
Mike, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. I think you hit on it in the presentation, Jackie, but the two sides of the plant, we're taking regulated medical waste into Plant 1 and then non-hazardous, non-infectious waste into Plant 2 for recycling. We can't take in any kind of radioactive or hazardous waste into the plant, but we can handle those separately if they should arise.
And I think also if there are other, like I mentioned, the roller bottles, we've also had questions around some of the nitrile gloves, Tyvek suits, those kinds of things from the clean room. We can also accept those kinds of things. Again, that would be something that you would discuss with Mike or someone from Triumvirate and assess that.
And here's a question. We currently autoclave our filters before sending them out for disposal. Will we still need to do this if we use the program?
I'm sorry, what was that again? It cut out for me.
Oh, we autoclave our filters before sending them out. Will we still need to autoclave the filters with this program?
No, actually, you don't have to. Obviously, there's probably procedures and SOPs in place. They would have to be investigated and see what it would take. But we've actually had some customers who are already able to shift and remove some of the autoclaves from their site. I don't know, Mike, if you want to add something to that.
Sure. Yeah, we found in some cases where people have removed the autoclaves, they're saving the expense of obviously the labor and the upkeep of that equipment, and it adds up to a significant number when they look at everything involved in doing that treatment on site. It's in many cases simpler to collect the material and ship it to us to handle that back-end treatment.
Great.
And so we have a question, is something similar going to be implemented in Europe?
So what I can say about that is right now we're on the East Coast. We've had this year to really get up and running and stabilizing. The Jeannette facility, in order to do something in Europe like this, we would have to be able to basically clone the Jeannette facility into a Europe. Right now we're definitely investigating it, but I can't say for sure if we will get there with this particular process in the near future. My job is to really find solutions all over the globe, and I am certainly going to do that. It's just that it's not something that I can turn over to the regular recycling industry. I do need something alternative like triumvirate. So that's as much as I can say. We are looking to expand. We are in discussions with triumvirate and looking particularly in the U.S., but also in other places as well. I just can't commit to anything today.
And so we have a question, how is the market for selling the lumber, the stops and the bumps, and the range of color, dimensions, and surface texture?
Mike, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. Sure. The market for the lumber is actually great. In a lot of cases, the demand is far outstripping our production capacity at the moment, and we're ramping up to meet that. As far as the color, dimensions, and surface texture, colors we kind of stay in a neutral pattern. I mean, the material can be dyed to specific applications, but we're kind of mass producing as wholesale, not for like individual markets. Dimensions, there's a variety of things we're making, everything from 2x2s, 2x4s, 4x4s, lots of different applications. And then surface texture is something that can be done, not something that we're currently exploring. If it was something, particular application that you need, please reach out and we can discuss it.
And what percentage of the product actually gets recycled, and where does the material that doesn't get recycled go to?
So it's 100%. In the old model, we did have the products split apart, and so things like the depth filters were only getting 25% of them were getting recycled. In this process, 100% of the product goes into the hopper. It's a little bit more automated. As the products come in, they literally go on a conveyor belt and get dumped into the grinders. So we don't have that manual disassembly anymore. And then the way that the manufacturing of the plastic lumber is done, the material that is the hard plastic sort of goes to the outside and forms the really nice hard casing. And the stuff that's really not as hard is sort of pushed towards the middle. And so it kind of makes this very sturdy plastic lumber, and again, 100% of the product gets recycled. And I do see a question here. Yes, the plastic lumber is non-structural. That is correct.
We've done some ASTM testing for specific applications, but yeah, for the most part, it's sold as a non-structural component.
Okay, and I went ahead and threw back up the poll questions. If you didn't have a chance to answer those before we began, if you want to go ahead and enter your responses now. And so how do I know this process is safe?
So
Mike?
Yes, the process is obviously permitted in both sides of the plant, in the regulated medical waste processing and in the recycling operation. By permit, we have to do efficacy testing to prove that the material is sterilized, and we've done follow-up testing on the produced plastic lumber to make sure the material is safe and non-hazardous as well.
And then I do see the question about the West Coast. We are currently looking at options in the West Coast. We do recognize that a lot of our customers in the biopharma industry are along the East Coast, along the West Coast, and then again in Europe and Asia. And again, I can't commit to anything at this point. It's going to take being able to reproduce what we're doing in Jeanette out on the coast, out on the West Coast, and if we were to find a place, or Triumvirate were to really find a place, it's going to take a little while to get that up and running. But as soon as we are there, if we get there, we'll definitely be reaching back out to our customers to let them know that we're expanding.
Can you provide some examples of the containers that are being reused to collect materials?
Yeah, again, I'm going to defer to Mike because, Mike, that's your business. You know the sort of different types and what they're called. We had been bound by just the cardboard boxes in the pilots. So this is actually working with Triumvirate, again, is another one of those beneficial areas. We can be a little more flexible. But, Mike, do you want to sort of talk about some of those?
Sure. On the non-hazardous bioprocess materials, the thing that we've really discovered in some of these walkthrough assessments is the amount of materials that are in the warehouses or in some kind of distribution network within the sites that's generating poly super sacks or 55-gallon open-top poly drums and other size containers that are basically just once used for raw materials coming in and then being sent out for disposal or recycling. You know, the beauty of this program is we're really encouraging people to take those essentially free containers and pack some material that they're producing into those for shipment. On the flip side, on the regulated medical waste side, there's more DOT regulations around what's acceptable for shipment of the material, and we offer a whole suite of reusable containers, everything from 1 gallon up to 210-gallon carts and everything in between. So depending on your volume of material and space constraints, et cetera, we can customize it to fit your needs.
Great. There's a couple questions on there, Mike, about the biological and medical waste. Is there a washing or flushing prior to sterilization? My first answer is no. I do know, though, sometimes customers will flush their filters with other things, too. Do you want to maybe comment on some of that as well coming through?
Yep, so we don't require anybody to flush or sterilize the filters if they're going to ship the material as regulated medical waste. Obviously, if the material is biohazardous on your site and you want to ship it as non-hazardous waste, we require that step to be done. It really doesn't affect our process either way, just a matter of which way we process it at the receiving at the plant.
Yeah, and then do you want to answer those other questions there? What method of sterilization is used, and does grinding follow or precede sterilization? Maybe talk to the process there a little bit, Mike.
The method of sterilization is a chemical sterilization process. Materials ground in the high pH solution reacts to sterilize any of the material that goes through that processing unit. So depending on the avenue of the plant, there's grinding and sterilization kind of in conjunction at the same time for the biomedical waste, and so that's kind of all in one step. And then downstream in the plastic lumber production, there's further grinding and separation and blending to make the material more amenable to extrusion. So there's a number of grinding and steps in the process.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, and another question, can we purchase some of the recycled plastic lumber for use at our site?
Absolutely.
Well, that would be through Triumvirate. It would not be through MilliporeSigma, but
yeah, we would welcome any inquiries you guys may have as to what your needs are and what the application that you want to use the material for. There's hundreds and hundreds. Jackie mentioned a handful of them, but there's hundreds of applications out there for this type of lumber. It's obviously very indestructible as far as weather and termites, et cetera, go, so it's good for a lot of environments.
And there's another question, assuming a rinse after sterilization. Actually, no, there is no water input into this system. So the chemical reaction and grinding that's going on is sterilizing the biohazardous material. When it comes out, it then is sometimes moist because there's a lot of filters that have been filtering water and other liquids. And so it does need to be dried so that as it goes on to the next step, we've got a very dry material. But there's really no rinsing, no water input into this.
In the sterilization process, just to clarify, if it's a reusable container that's going back out to the clients, we do have a sterilizing or cleaning and washing step for those reusable containers before they go back out.
Thank you. Yes. That's clear.
Okay, well, I think that is all the questions. Again, we will have a recorded version of this available to watch on demand in the multimedia section of the Bioprocess International website. And we'll be sending a follow-up email to all the participants with the contact information so you can follow up directly with the speakers. So thank you again to our speakers. And
thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.